As I'm sure a lot of you know, I've been really critical in the past over Draft in Flesh and Blood. I don't think Draft was very fun or interesting, and it felt like it was kind of stapled onto the competitive scene as an afterthought because you need to have Draft. I love Fab, and I think it has some of the best design in any TCG I have ever played before. Just Draft didn't live up to the expectations I had from the rest of the game. So when I tell you that Draft in this set is good, you know it comes from a place where I have no previous love for it, and if I thought it wasn't good, you bet your ass I'd be ripping into it just like I have in the past. All that to say, in my opinion, Part the Mistveil has the best draft format in Fab I have ever seen by a mile. So what makes this set so good? What design choices lead to it being as good as it is? A big part of it is just how deep the format is. We're coming off of Nationals right now, so I've been playing Draft for, a few weeks now. Probably not as much as I would have liked to leading up to Major, but, this was a bit of a time-crunched season. And, after a few weeks of playing, I'm still finding Draft fun and interesting and finding new ways to explore the format, even weeks later. In previous formats, after a couple drafts and figuring out how the draft set was supposed to work and kind of, finding the science of how to play the particular set, got really boring really fast. For the most part, decks would look more or less the same from each other from draft to draft, and games would play out more or less the same draft to draft. And a lot of times drafts would just feel very on rails. You'd figure out what hero you are, and then you just take the best class card for your hero every pick. Oh look, oh red, slam. Oh look, a blue 3-block, slam. Oh look, a particular card of a certain type that I'm missing from my deck, like a reaction, slam. And you weren't really thinking that deep about your picks very often. Sometimes you were. So there's a few picks during the draft that you'd have to kind of think about, but by and large, you're on rails for most drafts in this game, and that's not interesting in the slightest. And, honestly, leading up to this video, prior to Part the Mistveil, I've been watching a ton of Vintage Cube videos from LSV, and just trying to distill what makes Draft so much more interesting in a format like that. Just the actual draft portion is just really interesting and diverse, and lots of little interesting ways to navigate the format, and I was trying to really put that into words, and then Part the Mistveil came out before I could even make a video talking about that, and surprise to me, it distilled it into what makes that interesting. In this format, I find that the decks that I'm playing will look wildly different from each other from draft to draft. A big part of this is due to the Mystic slot. The design of the Mystic card slot is exactly what I wanted out of elemental cards in Tales of Aria. In a word, it's perfection. I've had multiple conversations with James White when I ran into him at events and such, saying that what we needed was more build around and micro synergies that could be drafted. And that's exactly what Mystic cards are, and they deliver on that perfectly. So what do I mean by micro synergies and such? So basically, I wanted more ways for you to go into a draft and find cards that, by themselves aren't incredible or anything. They're just fine. You'll take them, whatever. But then if you combine them with other cards, the sum of their parts becomes greater than the individual pieces. And that's what the Mystic cards do. They range from whatever cards to about what you'd expect for power level from a blue. But then when you start combining them together, they start, punching above their weight class. You start getting blues that could punch at the rate of a red. For example, you could play a Tidal Surge, and then you play Path Well Traveled on it, giving it go again. Then it also gets the +2 from its effect, and then you can pitch the Path Well Traveled to, say, Enigma Hero Power, creating Spectral Shield, swinging for 2, and also getting the 1 health on the back end. That's pretty good out of 3 blues. That's incredible synergy, and is exactly what we've been needing out of the draft sets, finding different ways to kind of play your cards and find little synergies between them. And this leads to a lot of interesting draft choices that you can make during the draft portion. During the draft, maybe you look at specific blue mystic cards that go with the class cards that you already have. Since drafting high synergy decks usually rewards you more than just slamming every class card in the pack and just having a good stuff deck like previous formats usually did. Another big part of this is because the delta of power between class cards and mystic cards is much smaller in previous formats. In previous formats, you'd look at what you would think is a 3-0 deck, and you'd notice there's a correlation to how many class cards in your deck. The more class cards you had, the better chance you had at 3-0ing your pod a lot of the time. So adding on this power delta disparity with the reward of finding little synergies really makes the draft portion far more interesting, because then you're starting to navigate the draft going, okay, well, I already have these specific cards. Now let me find certain cards that synergize with what I already have. And, it's going to be different from draft to draft because you picked up different pieces. Maybe in one draft I got a bunch of, title surges, where another I might have a lot of droplets, or another maybe I have washaways. So I'm trying to find different cards that work with each of these so I can get the most bang for my buck out of each of my cards. And the cards I'm looking for that work with each of these is going to be different. And then it's going to change based on, again, the class cards that I have. Maybe I have certain class cards that want other blue mystic cards to kind of enable them. This also has other impacts on the draft format, though. To recap real quickly, though, the quality of your deck isn't directly proportional to the number of class cards you have, and there's more reward for finding draft synergies. So how does that impact the draft format? Firstly, this impacts how people navigate the draft portion itself. Importantly, in early stages of the draft. In previous sets, it was really crucial to pick what hero that you thought was correct for the seat that you were in, and then commit to it, because you needed all of the class cards you could get. And if you pick wrong, you train wreck your draft, and it was almost impossible to switch heroes at that point if you find out you're in the wrong lane. This set, I don't really find that is the case as much for the above mentioned reasons. Of course, you could still end up kind of committing really early and forcing, but you don't have to. And this format really lends itself to more stay open strategies than previous formats did. I felt like in a lot of the previous formats, you really had to either straight up force or kind of force, where you draft like the best cards in the pack for a couple picks and kind of leave yourself open to specific heroes by cutting off certain class cards. Because if you just left all the good class cards in the pack, you're sending a signal saying that certain things are open. And then within a few picks, you just got to pick a lane. And after that, it's too late for you to switch out. The reason being it was too late to switch out is, again, the delta between class cards and non-class cards was much wider in these sets. So if you end up switching classes after giving up all of those class cards that you took early in the draft, the quality of your deck is so significantly worse that it's almost impossible to have a winning deck at that point. Which also is a part of why not staying open as long was a big deal. Because if you're just staying open, taking generics and stuff, you're not taking the high impact class cards, again, leading you to have a lower quality deck in the pod. And a lot of the times, doing that didn't really actually make you stay open, because you're just taking generics and sending all of the good class cards and then just picking something based on your right, but you passed a bunch of good stuff to your left, so you might just be creating someone or multiple people of the same class to your left, because they're going to be seeing a very similar signal to what you're seeing right now, and that can also end up train wrecking. So it's really difficult to properly navigate, and it leads to a lot of just cursed drafts where everyone train wrecks. In this format, though, it's far easier to pivot between heroes. For example, maybe you start off the draft taking a Chi or a good Mystic card. These are cards that are not only going to end up making your deck, but they're going to have a meaningful impact on your win rate, which, like I said a minute ago, is contrary to previous formats where taking those generics early didn't significantly impact the win rate of your deck very often. And giving up on that whole first cycle of the pack of premier class cards, again, it doesn't really significantly impact your win rate in this format, because the delta between the class and the not class cards, much closer. And honestly, I've run into multiple people during drafts where they had basically completely Mystic decks and just a couple class cards here and there. And their decks were perfectly reasonable. And that's crazy, which is another part of the format. There's so many different ways to build all the heroes where it's just so interesting. Like I said before, I had many drafts back to back where I draft the same hero, and my decks are wildly different from one draft to the next. Again, to compare to other sets, in previous sets, we would get this kind of effect by the set providing us with multiple heroes of each class, trying to represent different play styles of the different heroes, and facilitate different ways to draft each deck, so that way, one Guardian isn't fighting over the same cards as the other Guardian in the draft, because one's drafting, Victor, and the other one's Betsy. In my experience, though, this didn't necessarily always work out in that intended way, because a lot of the times it was just kind of understood that there was like one best hero for each class. For example, Kasai is just straight up better than Olympia. There's just very little reason to actually draft Olympia. There's technically reasons, there's little build-arounds and gold synergies, but it's just not good enough to actually be in the hero for the most part. So you'd end up in the spot where you basically were just ignoring the other three heroes a lot of the time, unless you had a really good reason to be in that hero, like you get a specialization for them or something like that, or maybe the packs are breaking in such a way where you're getting all of the cards that reward that specific hero. For example, maybe all the traps are being opened but not taken by the other rangers, so maybe I'll consider Riptide. Or, not that many of the 2 power or less cards are actually being opened, but I'm seeing a lot of the bonds going around, so maybe I should actually consider Katsu. But this isn't very frequent and isn't how a lot of the drafts play out. It's something that you should be like in a seat where you're ready to do that when you see the packs breaking that way, but you shouldn't be sitting down expecting that to happen. These are niche scenarios during the draft. Part that Mistveil does what those sets were trying to do, though, without actually having to have these extra heroes in the set. It gives you different ways to build each of the heroes, and you can just navigate that how you choose during the draft. Like maybe you're trying to draft a heavy reaction, value-oriented new, or maybe you're going for more of a fatigue style, or maybe you're going for more of one that's trying to play off the top of your opponent's deck. These are all different archetypes that you can build with hero without having to have a bunch of different class heroes shoved in the token slot of the pack, and you have to pick after the draft is over. Now, I have no problem with there being multiple heroes of each class, but I think it's important to point this out that this worked for LSS to look at for future sets so we can repeat this, because I think this worked really well, and I would like to see them find ways to repeat this in future sets, and I really think this comes down to the Mystic slot and how it played out. Now, I've given the set a ton of praise here, but it's not perfect. I have one single problem with the set, and that's the power level of specific cards in the format. For example, Moragai. There are some outlier Majestics in the format that just absolutely ruin the draft experience, or more specifically, the games. I don't think they negatively impact the draft portion. You having Moragai doesn't, ruin the draft portion for everyone else, but when you sit down for the games, cards like this just win the game by themselves, and sometimes you just sit down and you're just like, this game was an absolute non-game because my opponent had a Moragai. There was nothing I could do about it. There was no way I could have known because they were on the other side of the table. I guess I lose. F me, or whatever. I don't know. Some of these cards, they needed to be like expansion slots or something. I don't really know what to do. Maybe we move Majestics to the expansion slot or something. I have no idea what to do about something like this. It's not up to me to figure out how to solve that, but that is a massive issue, and I hope that we don't see something like this again in future draft sets. Other than that, though, without a doubt in my mind, this is the best draft set we have ever seen in Flesh and Blood. I really hope that the dev team learns from this and implements the successful design choices in future sets. But how do you feel about the draft format? Let me know in the comments below about your opinion. I'm going to be making another video like this in a couple days, kind of a similar talking point on the CC format, and boy, do I have some opinions to give on the CC format right now. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe. And I haven't figured out a way to smoothly add this last part to the intro yet, but I figured I should start mentioning this. I do buy and sell singles and collections for Fab and other TCGs, so if you'd like to sell anything, shoot me a message. All my socials are in the description below. But even if you don't, I appreciate you so much for watching. Peace, YouTube.